After the assassination of President Kennedy, Oswald arrived at police headquarters at 2:00 p.m., which is 3:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. 1 hour later, at 4:01 p.m., FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover telephoned Attorney General Robert Kennedy at home and said he thought they had the man who killed the president in Dallas. Hoover said, quote, "We have a case on Oswald, as he has been involved in the Fair Play for Cuba Committee," end quote. The day after the assassination, on Saturday morning, Hoover sent a letter to James Rowley, Chief of the United States Secret Service. Hoover wrote, quote, "There are enclosed the results of our inquiry into the assassination of President John F. Kennedy and background information relative to Lee Harvey Oswald," end quote. The next day, on Sunday, FBI Associate Director Clyde Tolson sent a memo to FBI official Alan Belmont. Tolson wrote, quote, "Results of the investigation have been reduced to written form. We can prepare a memorandum to the Attorney General to set out the evidence showing that Oswald is responsible for the shooting that killed the president. We will show that Oswald was an avowed Marxist, a former defector to the Soviet Union, and an active member of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, which has been financed by Castro. We will set forth the items of evidence which make it clear that Oswald is the man who killed the president," end quote. The FBI had already decided that Oswald was guilty, even though the Dallas police had not charged Oswald with the murder of President Kennedy. The FBI was determined to find, collect, and when necessary, fabricate evidence to show the public that Oswald was responsible for murdering both President Kennedy and Officer J.D. Tippit. Following are a few examples of the FBI's direct involvement in fabricating evidence as to Harvey Oswald's background, his employment, and his alleged involvement in the murders of President Kennedy and police officer J.D. Tippit. In August 1963, only 3 months before the assassination, 35mm photographs were taken of Harvey Oswald as he passed out Fair Play for Cuba literature in New Orleans. Charles Hall Steele, an active FBI informant and an active Dallas police informant, was helping Oswald pass out leaflets. Orvie O'Quinn, the TV cameraman who filmed the event, was also an active FBI informant. Thanks to these two FBI informants, the American public was able to watch Oswald on television within days of the assassination, showing that Oswald favored communism and Castro. Millions of people quickly formed an opinion of Oswald as they watched this former defector to the Soviet Union with his Russian wife and child, an admitted Marxist, as he passed out communist literature on the streets of New Orleans. But the public was never told that Lee Harvey Oswald was likely an FBI informant. In the summer of 1963, Oswald had the use of Guy Bannister's office for his Fair Play for Cuba Committee activities. But the FBI never told the Warren Commission that Guy Bannister was the former head of the FBI's office in Chicago and a close friend of FBI Director Hoover. Within hours of the assassination, the Dallas police confiscated 225 items of evidence that belonged to Harvey Oswald from Ruth Payne's garage and from Oswald's rooming house. The original 225 items were collected, dated, and initialed by Dallas police officers. A handwritten list of these items and a typewritten list of these 225 items were prepared by the Dallas police. Later that evening, the Dallas police transferred those 225 items of evidence to FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. During the next 3 days, the FBI examined the 225 items of evidence that belonged to Harvey Oswald. However, on November 26, the FBI returned a total of 455 items to the Dallas police. The FBI had added an additional 230 items to the original 225 items of evidence that were collected by the Dallas police. Identifying the additional 235 items of so-called evidence that were added by the FBI is simple. None of the 230 items added by the FBI, which are now in the National Archives, were dated nor initialed by the Dallas police. Some of these 230 items belong to Lee Oswald. Some of these items were fabricated, and some of these items were used to link Harvey Oswald to Castro and Cuba. Among the 230 items added by the FBI were fabricated W-2 forms, created for the purpose of fabricating the dates of Oswald's employment in 1955 and 1956. The typewritten text on each of these W-2 forms is identical, which means they were fabricated using the same typewriter, even though these W-2 forms were from 3 different companies in 2 different years. A list of these 455 items was published by the Warren Commission and identified as Commission Exhibit 2003. One of the items found by police was a Minox spy camera, yet the FBI tried to identify the Minox spy camera as a light meter. The appearance of a second wallet at 10th and Patton with Oswald's identification was witnessed by FBI agent Bob Barrett, but never mentioned by the FBI. Fabricated identification cards from that wallet with the names Alec and Alex James Heidel were quietly and secretly placed in Harvey Oswald's arrest wallet that was laying on Captain Fritz's desk. These fabricated ID cards were instrumental in connecting Harvey Oswald with the Manisher Carcano rifle that was allegedly ordered by Oswald, shipped to Oswald's post office box in Dallas, and then found on the 6th floor of the book depository. In the early morning hours of November 23rd, FBI agents arrived at Klein's Sporting Goods in Chicago to review company records on microfilm. From those microfilm records, documents were fabricated to make it appear as though Oswald purchased a rifle from Klein's. In the National Archives, I asked to see the original roll of Klein's microfilm. I wanted to look for alterations and splicing of the microfilm, but I was given a photograph of a small yellow cardboard Kodak box which supposedly held the microfilm. But the microfilm in the National Archives had disappeared. The morning after the assassination, FBI agents went to Stripling Junior High in Fort Worth. Assistant Principal Frank Cudley gave the agents Harvey Oswald's ninth grade school records from 1954, which soon disappeared. These school records had to disappear because in 1954, Lee Oswald was attending Beauregard Junior High in New Orleans with a near-perfect attendance record. My interview with Mr. Cudlady is available on YouTube. Oswald's original school records, elementary school, junior high school, and high school were all confiscated by FBI agents and disappeared. All that remains of Oswald's school records at the National Archives are black and white photographs, no originals. The week following the assassination, a federal agency picked up Lee Oswald's driver's license file from the Department of Public Safety in Austin, and the file disappeared. Harvey Oswald never had a driver's license, but Lee Oswald did have a Texas driver's license. On the morning of the assassination, Lee Oswald purchased beer at the Jiffy Store on Industrial Boulevard in Dallas and showed store clerk Fred Moore his driver's license for identification. Early on Monday morning, the day after Oswald was killed by Jack Ruby, FBI agents arrived at Dolly's Shoe Company in New Orleans and confiscated all original employment records for Harvey Oswald from January through April 1955. Those original records disappeared. Lee Oswald's time cards from his employment at the Jared Tujak Company from June 1955 through September 1956 were confiscated by the FBI. Most of those time cards disappeared because they conflicted with Harvey Oswald attending Warren Easton High School in New Orleans in the fall of 1955. At the same time, Lee Oswald was working for Tujak's on Canal Street. The Warren Report told us that Oswald worked at the Pfister Dental Laboratory in New Orleans for, quote, several months in the spring of 1956, end quote, but without a thread of evidence. In reality, Harvey Oswald worked at the Pfister Dental Laboratory from October 1957 through May 1958, while at the same time, Lee Oswald was in the Marines in Japan. On Monday, following the assassination, the FBI visited the Pfister Dental Laboratory and confiscated all employment records related to Harvey Oswald's employment. Those records disappeared, while the FBI fabricated 1956 W-2 forms in an attempt to show that Oswald worked at the dental laboratory in 1956 instead of 1957 and 1958 as reported by Palmer McBride, William Wolfe, and fellow employees at the dental laboratory. Warren Commission Attorney John Hart Ely was assigned to gather information related to Oswald's background. Several years later, Mr. Ely wrote a memo in which he described his thoughts and memories about the Warren Report. Mr. Ely wrote, quote, devising a coherent and credible theory to explain what happened in Dallas on November 22, 1963. One that isn't forced to hypothesize a number of duplicate Lee Harvey Oswalds proved quite a different matter. Mr. Ely was obviously aware of the possibility, in his own words, of duplicate Lee Harvey Oswalds. In April 1964, Staff Attorney Albert Jenner wrote to Warren Commission General Counsel J. Lee Rankin and said, quote, "There are details in Mr. Ely's memoranda which will require material alteration and, in some instances, omission," end quote. The FBI and a few select members of the Warren Commission understood that many things about Oswald's background had to be hidden from the public. This is why Oswald's original school records and teenage employment records disappeared. Lee Oswald's driver's license file disappeared. The second wallet found at the Tippit murder scene with ID cards for Alec James Heidel disappeared. Documents related to Harvey Oswald's living in Stanley, North Dakota in the summer of 1953 disappeared because at the same time, Lee Oswald was living in New York City. Items such as the dark blue jacket that Oswald wore to the book depository on November 22nd was switched with the light-colored jacket found in the Texaco parking lot a few hours later. The result of this manipulation and alteration of evidence was misunderstood and often confusing, but it allowed the FBI to feed the public a false narrative for Lee Harvey Oswald and his background. William Sullivan, the number 3 man in the FBI, understood the manipulation of evidence. Sullivan said, quote, "When an enormous organization like the FBI, with tremendous power still, can sit back and shuffle the deck of cards and pick up the card they want to show you, it may be you're not going to get the entire picture as fully as you would otherwise. If there were documents that possibly he, FBI Director Hoover, didn't want to come to the light of the public, then those documents no longer exist, and the truth will never be known," end quote. The FBI decided what evidence would survive and how that evidence was interpreted. Their job was to convince the public that Oswald was guilty, no matter the expense, no matter the effort, just convict Oswald. In the Tippit murder, a major effort was made by the FBI to make a few minor changes in time to the typewritten transcript related to the shooting of Officer Tippit. But these changes in time, from 1:06 p.m. to 1:16 p.m., now gave Oswald enough time to walk from his rooming house to 10th and Patton and shoot Tippit. The FBI's revised and altered transcript was relied upon by the Warren Commission to conclude that Oswald murdered Officer Tippit. Since 1964, researchers have continually argued as to whether or not the man arrested by Dallas police had enough time to walk from his rooming house at 1 o'clock to 1:03 to 10th and Patton by 1:16 p.m. Most researchers were relying on 1:16 p.m. as the correct time of Tippit's murder, noted on the FBI's revised 109-page typewritten transcript that was given to the Warren Commission on August 25, 1964. Known to researchers as Commission Exhibit 1974, this document placed the time of Tippit's murder at 1:15 to 1:16 p.m. Since 1963, researchers have argued and debated as to whether or not there was enough time for Oswald to have walked from his rooming house at 1 o'clock to 1:03 to 10th and Patton at 1:15. Now, the following presentation is focused on the time frame of 1 o'clock p.m. to 1:19 p.m. on November 22nd, 1963, as it relates to the murder of Officer J.D. Tippit. Now, we're going to talk about Dallas Police radio channels. In 1963, there were 2 radio channels used by the Dallas Police dispatcher to communicate with police motorcycles and patrol cars. The call sign for the Dallas Police radio was KKB 364. Both Channel 1 and Channel 2 were connected to recording devices. Dallas Police Channel 1 was connected to a dictabelt recorder that used vinyl belts for recording. Each belt recorded 15 minutes of continuous conversation. Channel 2 was connected to an autograph disc recorder that used round vinyl discs for recording. These vinyl discs could record conversations for either 9 minutes or 13 minutes, and they looked similar to a small phonograph record. Now, Officer Tippit was shot at 1:06 p.m. As we begin to review the evidence, it is very important for us to remember the time of the Tippit shooting as reported by several witnesses as 1:06 p.m. and first recorded on the dictaphone recorder at 1:08 p.m., just 2 minutes after Tippit was shot. As we begin to review the evidence, it is very important for us to remember the time of the shooting, as reported by several witnesses, was 1:06 p.m. 2 minutes later, a witness to the shooting tried to contact the police dispatcher using the police radio in Tippit's squad car, which was recorded by the police dictaphone at 1:08 p.m. After listening to the dictaphone recordings, FBI officials realized that Oswald could not have walked 9/10 of a mile from his rooming house at 1 o'clock to 1:03 to 10th and Patton by 1:06 p.m. You can't walk 9/10 of a mile in 2 or 3 minutes. The witnesses who said that Tippit was shot at 1:06 p.m. had to be ignored, which was easy for the FBI. But the time of the Tippit shooting, as recorded by the Dallas Police dictabelt recorder, had to be changed in order to show there was enough time for Oswald to have walked from his rooming house to 10th and Patton and shoot Tippit. At 1 o'clock p.m. on the afternoon of November 22nd, a Dallas police dispatcher placed a radio call to Officer Tippit using Channel 1. On Commission Exhibit 705, page 15, the Dallas police dispatcher tried to contact Tippit at 1 o'clock p.m. The dispatcher said, quote, 78 location, end quote. But Officer Tippit did not answer. At 1 o'clock p.m., Tippit was likely in the Top 10 record store on Jefferson Boulevard using the telephone. Tippit left the record store and 6 minutes later parked his patrol car directly in front of a driveway near 10th and Patton. At 1:05 p.m., Helen Markham was walking south on Patton Street to catch a city bus at 1:15. She was standing on the northwest corner of 10th and Patton when a police car drove slowly past in front of her. Barbara Davis and her sister Virginia were in the living room of their house on the southeast corner of 10th and Patton. Mr. and Mrs. Frank Wright were in their home at 501 East 10th. And taxi driver William Scoggins was sitting in his taxi cab on the southeast corner of 10th and Patton. Barbara Davis heard gunshots and ran to the telephone to call the police. Frank Wright ran outside while Mrs. Wright called the police. Mrs. Higgins was listening to the radio when the radio announcer said the time was 1:06 p.m. She heard gunshots and immediately called the police. Taxi driver William Scoggins was sitting in his taxi as the police car drove past in front of him. Scoggins watched as the police car drove slowly to the curb, while at the same time a young man walked over to the police car and began talking with the police officer. Moments later, Scoggins saw the young man shoot the police officer. Scoggins notified his dispatcher, who notified the police of a shooting. Barbara Davis, Mrs. Wright, and the taxi driver were the first people to call the police at 1:06 to 1:07 p.m. The police quickly dispatched three ambulances to the murder scene. Ambulance number 602 from Dudley Hughes, number 603 from Baylor, and ambulance number 605 from the Veterans Administration. Seconds before the shooting, Domingo Benavides and Jack Tatum were driving in separate vehicles west on 10th Street. When Benavides saw a man fire gunshots at a police officer, he drove his Chevrolet pickup to the curb and stopped. About 15 feet from Tippit's patrol car. Benavides ducked down onto the seat of his truck as the gunshots were fired. When Jack Tatum heard gunshots, he was 5 or 6 car lengths ahead of Benavides and stopped his red Ford Galaxy near the corner of 10th and Patton. When the shooting ended, Benavides watched as Lee Oswald turned around and began unloading his gun as he walked away. Benavides said that he got a good look at Oswald from the front. And when Oswald began to walk away, Benavides noticed that his hairline was squared off above his collar. But photographs of Harvey Oswald in the police station show that Harvey Oswald's hair was well below his collar. Benavides worked part-time as a barber and said that the man he saw, the shooter, Oswald, needed a haircut. Benavides watched as Oswald began walking west on the sidewalk while unloading the empty shells from his gun. As Lee Oswald hurried around the Davis' house on the corner and then across Patton Street, Benavides got out of his truck and walked 15 feet to the front of Tippit's patrol car. He grabbed the microphone in Tippit's patrol car and, at 1:08 p.m., tried to contact the police dispatcher by pushing the button on the microphone. But Benavides did not know how to operate the microphone in Tippit's patrol car. When Benavides pressed the button on the police microphone, his attempt to contact the police dispatcher was recorded by the dictabelt recorder. Benavides tried twice to contact the police dispatcher, but a conversation was not recorded because Benavides did not know how to use the police radio. 2 minutes later, at 1:10 p.m., Mr. Temple Boley arrived on site and grabbed the microphone from Benavides. Boley knew how to use the police radio and was able to report the shooting of a police officer to the police dispatcher, which was recorded on the vinyl dictabelts from Channel 1. Later that afternoon, Boley gave a statement to the Dallas police and said that when he arrived at the scene, he, quote, looked at my watch and it said 1:10 p.m. Boley's watch and the time recorded by the police dictabelt of Boley's contact with the dispatcher was 1:10 p.m. At 1:10 p.m., the police dispatcher received a message. 602 code 5. 602 was the number assigned to the Dallas police to the Dudley Hughes ambulance, and code 5 meant the ambulance was en route to 10th and Patton. Seconds later, the Dudley Hughes ambulance arrived on site at 10th and Patton. At 1:10 p.m., the dispatcher received the message 603 code 5. 603 was the number assigned to ambulances from Baylor, and code 5 meant the ambulance was en route to 10th and Patton. At 1:10 p.m., the dispatcher received the message 605 code 5. 605 was the number assigned to ambulances from the Veterans Administration, and code 5 meant the ambulance was en route to 10th and Patton. All contact between the dispatchers and the three ambulances were recorded at 1:10 p.m. by the dictaphone machine on Channel 1. Therefore, the shooting of Officer Tippit had to have occurred several minutes before 1:10 p.m. After Mr. Boley's brief contact with the police dispatcher at 1:10, the Dudley Hughes ambulance arrived. Driver Jason Butler removed a dark blue jacket from Tippit's body, and together with Boley, loaded Tippit's body into the ambulance. Butler said he was on the scene for 1 minute or less, and then drove to the Methodist Hospital. Butler hurried to the Methodist Hospital, where Tippit was taken to the emergency room for examination. Tippit was pronounced dead by Dr. LaCourie at 1:15 p.m. We can now begin to understand the importance and the significance of 1:08 p.m. and 1:10 p.m. as recorded by the Dallas Police discs and transcripts on Channel 1 as they relate to the time of the Tippit murder. Tippit was shot at 1:06 p.m., a couple of minutes before Benavides finally got out of his pickup, walked to Tippit's patrol car, and tried to contact the police dispatcher at 1:08. Police dispatcher Murray Jackson, who worked 20 years at the Dallas Police Department, told the House Select Committee on Assassinations that after his shift ended on November 22, 1963, Police Chief Lumpkin had the dictabelts from Channel 1 and the discs from Channel 2 placed in sealed envelopes and taken to his office. On November 29th, the vinyl discs from Channel 1 and Channel 2 were given by Chief Lumpkin to the Secret Service for transcribing. The Secret Service copied the belts and discs with a tape recorder and then gave the original belts and discs to the FBI. Dallas Police Communications Director James Bowles also made tape-recorded copies of the belts and discs, but said the FBI did not return the original belts and discs to the Dallas Police until March of 1964. In early December, the Secret Service, Dallas Police, and FBI agents began listening to the original vinyl dictabelt and vinyl disc recordings, but their attention was focused on events and situations related to the assassination of President Kennedy, and was not focused on the murder of Officer Tippit. On December 3rd, 1963, a brief 10-page transcript was prepared and given to Dallas Police Chief Jesse Curry. Transcribed from Channel 2, this transcript included information about the president's arrival, the motorcade, the shooting, the escort to Parkland Hospital, and the Tippit shooting. This document was published in the Warren volumes as Sawyer Exhibit A. 2 days later, on December 5th, 1963, a very brief 2-page transcript was prepared by Sergeant Hensley from Channel 2 pertaining to the incident, and very briefly described a portion of the Tippit shooting. This document was published in the Warren volumes as Sawyer Exhibit B. In early 1964, James Bowles made a tape-recorded copy of Channel 1 and Channel 2. Bowles kept one copy for himself and gave one copy to the FBI. FBI personnel listened to the Dallas police recordings and likely made transcripts of conversations from both Channel 1 and Channel 2. But it seems that little attention, if any, was given to the Tippit murder. Earlene Roberts, the housekeeper at Harvey Oswald's rooming house, told the FBI that Oswald left the house a minute or two after 1:00 p.m. while zipping up his dark-colored jacket. A dark-colored zip-up jacket. The distance from the rooming house to the Tippit murder scene was 9/10 of a mile. The FBI knew it was not possible for Oswald to have left the rooming house at 1:01 or 1:02 and walked 9/10 of a mile to 10th and Patton in 3 or 4 minutes. This created a big problem because the FBI now realized that Oswald, who was dead, could not have shot Tippit. The FBI had to change the time of the Tippit shooting. The original Dallas Police dictabelts and discs were given to the Secret Service on November 29th, and they were authentic. After the Secret Service gave the vinyl dictabelts and vinyl discs to the FBI, we know they were copied onto a tape recorder. A tape recording could be played over and over without degradation, whereas the vinyl dictabelts and vinyl discs were degraded when played over and over. Now, changes cannot be made to the original vinyl dictabelts or discs. However, changes can be made to a dictabelt if conversations from the dictabelt, the vinyl belts and vinyl discs are first recorded onto a tape recorder, and then changes can be made to the new tape recording. The new tape, with alterations, can then be played back onto new vinyl discs and vinyl belts. The new discs would appear to be genuine. James Bowles told researcher Gary Mack that he could not be sure that the belts and discs returned by the FBI to the Dallas police were the same that the FBI received from the Secret Service a week later. Changing the times on paper transcripts, however, would be much easier. Simply draw a line through the time recorded on the paper transcript and then handwrite in a different time. But that would be noticeable. A third way to change the times on a typewritten transcript would be to simply prepare a new transcript and make sure all of the time entries were sequential. It appears that the first transcript given to the Warren Commission by the FBI in March 1964 had a few changes, both handwritten and typed changes. When reading a revised transcript, the reader would assume the transcript is a continuous thread of discussion between a police dispatcher and the patrol units. If the reader happened to notice that 1 or 2 pages out of a 100-page transcript showed an incorrect time, the reader would probably assume this was a mistake, or perhaps a typographical error. J. Lee Rankin, General Counsel for the Warren Commission, read the 2-page transcript of Channel 1 given to Chief Curry that was prepared by Sergeant Hensley on December 3, 1963. It would appear that when Rankin read this 2-page transcript, he realized that he had never been given a complete transcript of Dallas Police Channel 1 and Police Channel 2. In early January 1964, James Bowles gave the FBI tape recordings of the Dallas Police Channels 1 and 2, but the FBI never gave those tapes to the Warren Commission. On March 3rd, 1964, Rankin wrote to FBI Director Hoover requesting the Bureau obtain original transcripts of all radio transmissions from Channel 1 and Channel 2 from the Dallas Police, covering the period 12:20 p.m. to 6 p.m. on November 22nd, 1963. On March 6th, 3 days later, in response to Rankin's letter of March 3rd, Hoover wrote a letter to the Dallas Police requesting transcripts. On March 20th, 1964, the Dallas Police furnished a transcript of Channel 1 and Channel 2 to the FBI. 2 weeks later, on April 7th, the FBI gave a 96-page document to the Warren Commission consisting of typewritten transcripts from Channel 1 and Channel 2. Channel 1 consists of pages 1 through 66. Channel 2 consists of pages 67 through 96. The first page of the FBI transcript reads, quote, Dallas Police Department made available the following transcripts of all radio transmissions from Channel 1 and Channel 2 of the Dallas Police radio station KKB 364, covering the period 12:20 p.m. to 6 p.m. November 22nd. The FBI gave Mr. Rankin two transcripts of each channel, but the FBI was apparently unaware that the transcript they sent to the Warren Commission contained timing entries that conflicted with the FBI's time of 1:16 that they had established as the time of the Tippit murder. Rankin knew the FBI had interviewed several people who witnessed the Tippit shooting. Agents filed dozens of reports, examined Tippit's medical records, and his time of death. Rankin knew the FBI reported 1:16 as the time of the Tippit shooting to the Warren Commission. But in the 96-page transcript, Rankin found several unexplained timing errors. On page 19 of the Channel 1 transcript, the police dispatcher had contact with the 3 ambulances dispatched by the Dallas Police to the site of the Tippit shooting. All of these contacts were recorded at 1:10 p.m. A private citizen, in this case Domingo Benavides, tried to contact the dispatcher at 1:08 p.m., followed by Mr. Bowling's contact with the dispatcher at 1:10 p.m. when Bowling said, quote, "It's a police officer, somebody shot him," end quote. These entries were on the original Dallas Police dictabelt from Channel 1, as transcribed by James Bowles. The timing of the entries of 1:08 by Benavides and 1:10 by Temple Bowley proves that Tippit was shot a couple of minutes before Benavides made contact with the police dispatcher at 1:08 p.m. Warren Commission counsel Rankin did not understand how the FBI could fix the time of the Tippit shooting at 1:16 when the Dallas police recordings showed that someone using Tippit's police radio had contacted the police dispatcher at 1:08 p.m. and again at 1:10 p.m. Rankin was not happy and perhaps began to mistrust the FBI. In an attempt to circumvent the FBI and get original transcripts from the Dallas police, Rankin drafted a letter on May 28th to Forrest Sorrells, the special agent in charge of the Secret Service in Dallas. Rankin asked Sorrells if he would, quote, please arrange to record the Dallas Police Department tapes of radio broadcasts over police channels 1 and 2 on November 22nd, 1963, between the hours of 12:30 and 2 o'clock p.m. Sorrells likely notified Hoover of Mr. Rankin's request because Sorrells never responded to Rankin's letter. A month and a half later, without hearing from Mr. Sorrells, Rankin had no choice but to ask the FBI to obtain the radio broadcasts from the Dallas police. On July 16th, 1964, Rankin wrote to Hoover and said, quote, we call your attention to the fact that in the Channel 1 transcript, there appears to be an error on page 19 immediately following the words, quote, what's that address on Jefferson, end quote. There appears to be a time error of 1:10 p.m. This would be inconsistent with the known time of the Tippit shooting. And judging from the time entries on the preceding page, this would appear to be a typographical error. Rankin then requested that Hoover, quote, obtain the original tapes of the radio broadcasts and prepare a new transcript from these tapes. During the course of preparation of a new transcript, we ask that you attempt to clarify this apparent discrepancy, end quote. In 1964, Mr. Rankin was questioning the time of 1:10 p.m. on the police transcripts, just as we are questioning the time of 1:10 p.m. in 2024. Now we're going to talk about Commission Exhibit 1974, the FBI's revised timeline. Commission Exhibit 1974 is a typewritten transcript created by the FBI for their revised timeline. On July 21st, 1964, Dallas Police Chief Curry made a series of 16 Channel 1 dictabelts and 5 Channel 2 discs available to an unidentified FBI agent. This unidentified agent then reviewed and transcribed the dictabelts from Channel 1 and transcribed the discs from Channel 2 at Dallas Police Headquarters. The FBI agent then sent these transcripts to FBI headquarters on July 24. The FBI now had 2 tape-recorded copies of Police Channels 1 and 2 and typewritten paper transcripts from Channel 1 and Channel 2. Now, the FBI needed to protect their image, which was very, very important to Hoover. After reading Mr. Rankin's letter, FBI officials realized, probably for the first time, that the Warren Commission knew there was a timing problem. Earlene Roberts told the FBI that Oswald left the rooming house a few minutes after 1 o'clock, 1:01, 1:02. Dallas police tapes recorded Benavides and Boley's contacting the police dispatcher at 1:08 and again at 1:10 p.m. to report that a policeman had been shot. 3 ambulances were dispatched by the police to 10th and Patton. And at 1:10 p.m., all 3 ambulances notified the police dispatcher they were en route to the scene. The FBI knew the distance between the rooming house and 10th and Patton was 9/10 of a mile. They also knew that Oswald could not possibly walk 9/10 of a mile in 3 or 4 minutes and shoot Tippit at 1:06 p.m., as reported by several witnesses. At this point, senior FBI officials realized the man arrested by the Dallas police could not have shot Officer Tippit. However, Oswald was dead, and he was their only suspect. In order to protect the FBI's image and prove to the public that Oswald killed Tippit, senior FBI officials made the decision to fabricate the time that Tippit was murdered. The FBI's conscious decision to fabricate evidence and blame Harvey Oswald for the Tippit murder is only one part of their complicity in helping to cover up the true facts of the assassination of Officer Tippit and of President Kennedy. Rankin requested Dallas police transcripts from the FBI on July 24th, 1964. July 24th. Nearly a month later, on August 20th, the FBI had still not given the transcripts to the Warren Commission. It appears that FBI officials were withholding their revised transcript with numerous changes in time, knowing that the government printing office would soon begin printing the Warren Report. By waiting as long as possible before giving the revised transcript to the Warren Commission, FBI officials knew the commission would have little or no time to question the accuracy of their revised transcript. On August 20th, 1964, Hoover wrote to Rankin and advised that a new transcript had been made. Hoover also told Rankin, quote, "However, due to the badly worn condition of the original tapes, certain portions are being checked for accuracy. The transcription will be furnished to you in the immediate future," end quote. 5 days later, on August 25th, 1964, the FBI's revised transcripts were given to the Warren Commission. Following are pages from the FBI's revised transcript. It is worth noting that police dispatchers for Channels 1 and Channel 2 are now identified by name. The original Dallas Police transcript, Commission Exhibit 705, shows that at 1:08 p.m., a citizen, Domingo Benavides, used Tippit's police radio, call unit number 78, to contact the police dispatcher. On page 48 of the FBI's revised report, the number 78 has been changed to the number 58, which is the Dallas Police Code for an unknown automobile unit. A second number 78 was changed to number 488, a number assigned to by the Dallas Police to supervisors and detectives of the Special Service Bureau. The changes from number 78 to 58 and the change from number 78 to 488 was an attempt by the FBI to hide contact between the police dispatcher and Domingo Benavides, who tried to use the police radio in Tippit's patrol car at 1:08 p.m. The FBI reported the conversation between number 58 and number 488 with the dispatcher as garbled. The original Dallas Police transcript shows the police dispatcher's contact with Mr. Boley at 1:10 p.m. The newly revised FBI transcript changed the time Mr. Boley contacted the police from 1:10 to 1:16 p.m. Now, there are quite a few other changes that were made by the FBI, and I will list them. Number one, the original Dallas Police transcript, Commission Exhibit 705, shows the dispatcher's contact with the Dudley Hughes ambulance number 602 while en route to the murder scene at 1:10 p.m. The revised FBI report, Commission Exhibit 1974, changed the dispatcher's contact with Dudley Hughes from 1:10 to 1:19 p.m. Number two, the original Dallas Police transcript, Commission Exhibit 705, shows the dispatcher's contact with Baylor Ambulance, number 603, while en route to the murder scene at 1:10 p.m. The revised FBI report, Commissioning Exhibit 1974, changed the dispatcher's contact with Baylor from 1:10 to 1:19 p.m. The original Dallas Police transcript, Commissioning Exhibit 705, shows the dispatcher's contact with the Dudley Hughes ambulance number 602 when they arrived at the murder scene at 1:10 p.m. The revised FBI report, Commissioning Exhibit 1974, changed the dispatcher's contact with Dudley Hughes from 1:10 to 1:19 p.m. Number 4, the original Dallas Police transcript, Commissioning Exhibit 705, shows the dispatcher's contact with both Dudley Hughes and with the Baylor ambulance at 1:10 p.m. The revised FBI transcript report, Commissioning Exhibit 1974, changed the dispatcher's contact with both ambulances from 1:10 to 1:19 p.m. Number 5, the original Dallas Police transcript shows the Dudley Hughes ambulance number 602 arrived at the murder scene at 1:10. The revised FBI transcript changed the arrival time of Dudley Hughes ambulance from 1:10 to 1:19 p.m. Number 6, the original Dallas Police transcript shows the Veterans Administration ambulance number 605 en route to the scene at 1:10. The revised FBI transcript changed the dispatcher's contact with the Veterans Administration ambulance from 1:10 to 1:19 p.m. Number 7, the original Dallas Police transcript shows the dispatchers acknowledged the Veterans Administration ambulance number 605 was en route to the scene at 1:10. The revised FBI transcript changed the dispatcher's contact with the Veterans Administration ambulance from 1:10 to 1:19 p.m. Number 8, the original Dallas Police transcript shows the dispatcher's contact with Dudley Hughes ambulance number 602 at 1:10. Ambulance driver Jason Butler tells the dispatcher, quote, "From out here on 10th Street, 500 block, this police officer's just shot. I think he's dead." The revised FBI transcript changed the dispatcher's contact with Dudley Hughes from 1:10 to 1:19 p.m. The FBI's revised transcript, which later became Commissioning Exhibit 1974, was given to the Warren Commission on August 25, only 1 month before the Warren Commission report was released. No more letters from Mr. Rankin. The Warren Commission ignored the Dallas Police transcript, Commissioning Exhibit 705, and based the time of the Tippit shooting at 1:16 from the FBI's revised transcript, Commissioning Exhibit 1974. These changes in time were never questioned by the Warren Commission and were barely noticeable in the FBI's 106-page document. But the timing changes made by the FBI were, in fact, very significant. Changing the time the shooting was first reported by Boley from 1:10 to 1:16 gave Oswald just enough time to walk from his rooming house at 1:01 p.m. to 10th and Patton at 1:16 and shoot Tippit. In accordance with the above analysis, the following two documents show that Tippit was declared dead at Methodist Hospital by Dr. Richard LaCorey at 1:15. Police officer R.A. Davenport was en route to 10th and Patton when he saw an ambulance racing to the hospital. Davenport reported, quote, "Met the ambulance carrying the wounded officer to Methodist Hospital. We assisted in getting the officer to the emergency room," end quote. Officer Davenport observed the doctors and nurses trying to bring Tippit back to life, and at 1:15 p.m., Dr. LaCorey pronounced Tippit dead. These documents offer additional evidence to show that the timestamps on the Dallas Police Dispatcher transcripts were changed by the FBI. From the FBI's amended transcript and the FBI reports of carefully selected witnesses, the Warren Commission concluded, quote, "The shooting of Tippit has been established at approximately 1:15 or 1:16 p.m., end quote. A seemingly small adjustment in the time of the Tippit shooting was all the FBI needed to show the Warren Commission that Oswald walked 9/10 of a mile from his rooming house to 10th and Patton and shot Tippit at 1:16 p.m. Since 1964's, researchers have mistakenly relied on the FBI's revised transcript, Commission Exhibit 1974, as to the time of Tippit's murder. John Hart Eli, at age 26, was the youngest member to serve on the staff of the Warren Commission. Following the Warren Commission, Mr. Eli was a professor of law at Yale for 5 years, at Harvard Law for 9 years, Stanford Law Dean for 14 years, and was recognized as one of the most important constitutional scholars of his generation. Mr. Eli's assignment for the Warren Commission was to investigate the history and background of Lee Harvey Oswald and his family. It is important for us to remember that on April 10, 1964, Commission Attorney Albert Jenner wrote to General Counsel Rankin and, I quote, "There are details in Mr. Eli's memoranda which will require a material alteration and in some cases omission," end quote. Alteration and omission of evidence relating to the background of Lee Harvey Oswald was required. In 1975, Mr. Eli wrote, quote, "But devising a coherent and credible theory to explain what happened in Dallas on November 22, 1963, one that isn't forced to hypothesize a number of duplicate Lee Harvey Oswalds, has proved quite a different matter," end quote. Mr. Eli was obviously aware of the possibility, in his own words, of duplicate Lee Harvey Oswalds. Mr. Eli wrote, "We were all more innocent a decade ago. Since that time, to our collective sorrow, we have learned many things. We have learned, contrary to what once seemed common sense, that persons in high places will, at substantial risk to themselves, cover up for the misdeeds of subordinates who seem of little consequence. In 1964, one had to be a genuine radical to take seriously the thought that other federal agencies were withholding significant information from the Warren Commission. In 1975, it would take a person of unusual naivety to ignore that possibility. We have learned that investigative agencies are not the monoliths we once thought they were. Perhaps there is no realistic possibility that those in possession of the facts bearing on this issue will ever reveal them. But even that is something we are entitled to know." End quote. Every American is entitled to be angry about the recent disclosures and accusations. But perhaps our entitlement is the greatest of all. Every American is entitled to know the facts and the truth about the assassination of President Kennedy and of Officer J.D. Tippit.